welcome to part 3 of our post-cruise stop in Australia. Part 3 is all about Melbourne and the surrounding area and what the heck we did for 10 days while we visited her brother and my brother-in-law, Li Guang. Well, if you watched our last video, you saw we were in Wooga Wooga. And leaving Wooga Wooga in the morning, we headed towards Melbourne, Australia. Most of that time we were heading through flatlands and grazing lands, gliding past the farms and ranches of Australia on the back roads until we finally saw this one sign of urbanization show up. We soon connected with Highway M31 and entered Melbourne from the north. From there, we proceeded south and east to the suburb of Glen Waverley. Melbourne is made up of a conglomeration of 31 local government areas comprising what is called the Greater Melbourne area and spreads out over 3,858 square miles, 9,993 square kilometers, in those 31 different communities. As of the census in 2023, the population of the Greater Melbourne area was 5,200,000, or about 19% of the total population of Australia. Inhabitants of the Greater Melbourne area are referred to as Melburnians. My brother-in-law, Li Guang, lives in the Melbourne suburb of Glen Waverley. Glen Waverley is an interesting mix of old houses and new houses, and one of those neighborhoods in most large urban areas that are being renewed by selling an older home and its land for fantastical prices, tearing it down and rebuilding. Some ultra-modern, some contemporary, and some just ridiculous palatial style homes with no clearly definable architectural roots. But our home for the next 10 days was Li Guang's comfortable and sturdy, older Australian-style home. And after grabbing something to eat and relaxing for the evening, it was time to get ready for the next morning, where we would walk to a local park. Located on the Dandenong Creek Trail, we started our walk in the Bushy Park Wetlands area. The Bushy Park Wetlands in Melbourne is a conservation park located in Glen Waverley. It's about a 30-hectare or 74-acre area along the Dandenong Creek. The park offers walking and hiking paths, a bird-watching hide, and opportunities to observe various bird species. One of the more interesting was this purple Australasian swamp hen that, although perfectly capable of flying, are seldom seen flying because, apparently, it just doesn't want to. Moving on, we spotted this mixed colony of great white ibis and pelicans populating the small island in the center of the lake. They were seemingly getting along perfectly fine, albeit in a smelly and noisy fashion. From the Bushy Park Wetlands area, we moved into the Gels Lake Conservation Area. This urban conservation area attracts over 900,000 visitors a year and has over 9 kilometers of paths and trails, spread out over 127 hectares or 314 acres of wide open spaces and plenty of picnic areas. The land once belonged to a cattle rancher family called Gels, and the land was previously used as a cattle run, market garden, and orchard. Today, of course, it is a large family-friendly park right in the middle of Australia's second largest urban area. Returning from our walk, we headed out to find some dinner and ended up at Shanghai Red. Shanghai Red is a restaurant at the Glen Shopping Center serving up all manner of Chinese food. Here's a quick look at the menu, which is actually 28 pages long, and we decided to focus on the xiaolong bao. Starting off with some chilled tofu with 100-year-old eggs and chilled black tree fungus, and then went right to the xiaolong bao and a couple of dim sum items. Even though this is a restaurant residing in a shopping center, The beer is cold and the food is very good. Oh, bright and early the next morning, we were up and moving towards our destination of Otway Fly Treetop Adventures. And while there are several things to do at Otway Fly, we opted for the treetop walks and not for the more adventuresome zipline tours. Otway Fly Treetop Adventures Park is located in the Otway Mountain Ranges, about 2 hours and 45 minutes from Melbourne, near the small town of Ferguson. It was a scenic drive all the way to the park as we transitioned from the grasslands and rolling hills of the countryside into the mountains. We took the long hike from the car park to the ticket center and showed our online passes. We needn't have worried, there was no one else there except us. We looked around a bit, noticing that there was a restaurant and a souvenir shop, and exited for the walk to the impressive engineering marvel that is the Treetop Walk. First, though, is about a 1 kilometer ground walk through the lush, temperate rainforest. The rainforest is dominated by giant ferns and spectacular mountain ash trees. These giant trees can stretch up to 100 meters into the sky and are densely packed into the landscape. One interesting spot as you approach the skywalk is the Enchanted Forest. The Enchanted Forest is populated by fairies, gnomes, and mythical creatures and flowers created by a local men's club and residing in the forest at Otway Fly. There's even a dragon hiding in them there hills. Leaving the Enchanted Forest, and we were back on the path for the Otway Fly Treetop Walk. To me, I just couldn't get enough of the forest. The quiet, the colors, and the texture of the forest bordered on the overwhelming. This area used to be home to the logging industry, and it boggled the mind to know that people actually worked in these dense wooded areas. Continuing on, Li Guang signaled us, indicating that the Treetop Walk was just ahead. The Treetop Walk is just that. It's a scaffold suspended about 98 feet or 30 meters above the ground. In all, the scaffolding extends about 600 meters through the top of the forest. Walking along the elevated platforms gave us a stunning view and a different perspective on the forest below, while breathing in the invigorating, clean mountain air with just a hint of that forest decay lying below. And following the path, we eventually made it to the observation tower. Nearing the treetops at 148 feet, or a little more than 45 meters, the observation tower is a spiral staircase leading to the top of the forest. And as with all things, I started out pretty strong here. And somewhere along those 105 steps up, I started to run out of gas. But eventually I made it, and it was time to pose for those obligatory photo ops and gaze in wonder through the top of the forest. Well, you know what is said about that which goes up, it must come down. And, at least for me, going down was easier than going up. We walked down to the end of what's called the cantilever, which is a section of the walkway which, as stated, is cantilevered out over the forest. From the cantilever, we could look back to the section of the walkway that would take us back to the visitor center eventually. It's also a good place to sort of get a sense of scale of these things. Eventually, it was time to head on back down off the cantilever, away from the tower, and head back toward the visitor center. It was raining on us just a little bit, but it wasn't bad at all. We still had the tree cover and the signage to entertain us and inform us. The depth, the layers, and the texture of the foliage covering and the forest floor continued to impress. And then suddenly it was time to descend from our lofty platform to the ground and the floor of the forest once more. Here's one of those informative signs saying I might be able to find a duck-billed platypus. And while I searched, unfortunately I did not find my duck-billed platypus. On the way out, they had signs encouraging you to keep moving. Here's one encouraging you to watch out for snakes and keep going to the visitor center, only 1.2 kilometers away. And sprinkled throughout the forest are the 8 different zipline stations that can take you on a 2.5-hour journey ziplining through the forest on 6 different zip lines. On the way back to the visitor center, we passed many more of the giant mountain ash trees stretching to the sky and enjoyed a photo op or two. Only 940 more meters to the visitor center, and watch out for those sugar gliders. Interestingly, the signage was delivering conflicting messages. Look down and watch out for snakes. Look up and watch for sugar gliders. And at the time, I thought it more important to keep looking down, watching out for snakes. Some of the areas in the park remain closed off, such as this path to the zip line viewing station. Well, that was it. One more photo op with a giant mountain ash, and then we were off to nearby Great Otway National Park. Although the main entrance is on the Great Ocean Road a few miles away, there was one literally just a couple of miles away from Otway Fly Park. So we went there and took the hike to Triplet Falls. The path there was more the same that we found at Otway Fly, but more in its natural state. Through the densest part of the forest, the path was bridged by these elevated walkways. The walkways were often punctuated by these giant logs that had fallen across and then been carved up by the National Park Service. The Great Otway National Park is a national park located in the southwest region of Victoria. The park is 103,185 hectares, or about 254,980 acres in size. That's about 398 square miles, and is located about 101 miles southwest of Melbourne. Here was our goal, the Triplet Waterfalls. Unfortunately, now mostly covered by the foliage, it was a little hard to get a good view of the waterfalls. But try we did, so on we walked looking for a better vantage point. And we finally stumbled across one that was a little better, but still pretty much obscured by the foliage. Regardless, it was time to move on and head back toward home, retracing our steps through the forest, past burbling brooks and tiny streams where I continued to look for my duck-billed platypus, but again, unfortunately, never found one. Of duck-billed platypus behind, it was time to stagger out of the forest, jump into Li Guang's trusty Subaru Forester, and make our way back 3 hours to Melbourne. But somewhere along the way, on the way back to Melbourne, we decided to take a break from the rolling countrysides and make our way to the Great Ocean Road. And as we bid goodbye to those rolling hills, a herd of bovine bid us adieu, and we were on our way. Fog and a bit of weather had set in on our way to the Great Ocean Road and gave us a somewhat mysterious and foggy path down to the ocean. Depending on who's giving you the information, the Great Ocean Road welcomes between 3 million and 8 million visitors a year. Many of those visitors are from overseas, thus the friendly warning, hey, drive on the left side in Australia. A great part of the road tightly hugs the cliffs and coastline of the Southern Ocean, occasionally weaving in and out of the hills that line the rugged coast. It was here that we saw one of the most unique houses that I've ever seen. Yes, that is a house on a stick. By the time we got back to Melbourne, it was time for dinner, and we decided to have dinner at the Souvlaki Bar, Miss Pickle 1971. Miss Pickle 1971 was voted the best food in Glen Waverley at least once and features Mediterranean and Greek food. It's a unique space and one of two of the same name, this one being in the Glen in Glen Waverley. It has a modern vibe and the food is actually very good. We all settled on the souvlaki, served in the form of gyros, and while I settled on lamb, they settled on chicken. Well, that's it for this part. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to be kept up to date with new releases. Check out my website at tomsmultiinterest.com and stay tuned for the last part of our tour in Australia. And stay tuned for more from the archives. Thank you for watching, and as always, safe and happy travels from T's Cruise and Travel Muse.